Bridges, Phantom Thread tells the story of a famous dressmaker in England. Is this a costume designer's dream come true, this movie?
Yeah, I think so. It was for me, although I've been really lucky in having a lot of great dream come true kind of films, including other Paul's other movies like There Will Be Blood and Boogie Nights. That was a dream come true. And so I've been really lucky, but this was just another case of having a wonderful challenge and being able to make beautiful dresses and also illustrate the characters' inner lives with what they wear on the outside.
The clothing is so integral to the story. How early on did you come into the process working on this movie?
You know, I'm really lucky having worked with Paul for 22 years, and so I always get to see a very early version of the script. And so probably a year and a half before we shot, the first time I read the script and was able to look at some of the things that Paul was looking at and read some of the books that were some of his inspiration for either the character or some of the scenes in the film. You know, I read the biography of Balenciaga, which was that we had little bits in there, and it was just great intro into the world of a couture house, even though it's different that was a French couture house and ours is London. But I knew nothing about really what was going on in London at that time. So all of that research and the people who were designing them, that was a fascinating revelation to me.
You mentioned something about being able to tell a story through costumes. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I really do feel like bottom line, that's what I do. And, you know, always very mindful of time and place and, you know, so economic status, how someone's feeling inside, what they're trying to show the world outside. So even if the sound were turned off, hopefully you would get the gist of the story by what they're wearing, how they wear it, what they put on, to evoke a mood or what the character's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
So what were some of your initial ideas for the various dresses in this movie?
Yeah. Well, you know, we had Paul as well as Daniel and I. Like Paul and I talked about the certain milestone gowns of the story and put together some images. And then we went to New York and met with Daniel early on, at least 6-7 months before we were going to start shooting. And just talked about what it could be and what it shouldn't be and what it could be. And then I think what evolves is, you know, we had to see who the actress is, and then we had to see where we were going to shoot. And I think it's a very interesting process of making a film where it sort of reveals itself. Every decision influences the next decision. And so research builds on another thing. So we have a basic idea, but then you get the casting and it changes it a little bit. Or Paul will get another idea, or we will have seen some fabric that we can't live without. Or so it builds on itself. So I think the original idea was to try to represent as clearly as possible the world of London couture, different from Paris, different from anywhere else, New York, in 1955. And then the rest of it sort of developed and bloomed, so to speak, as we got into it further.
And in terms of color, what were your initial ideas for conveying a mood or a tone, things like that?
I think, you know, it was more rich colors, but then there's also kind of you see the film and it's surprisingly colorful as far as the choices, unlike today where there's quite not that much color. Then it was a little more exuberant, you know, and again, time and place. London had just come out of its very last bit of rationing after World War II. So I think there was a little fresh look, and fabrics were becoming more and more available. Even there's the shade quality to the work that was happening in London. This was a time to maybe experiment with colors, and Reynolds, you know, was, as you can see, was using some color.
It's interesting because, I mean, thinking back to my memories of the movie, I mean, Reynolds's home and workspace is very white and clean and kind of sterile. And then, I mean, a lot of the color comes into the movie when this woman comes into his life. I mean, was that intentional, or?
I mean, that is the story. You know, you perfectly illustrated, like telling, you know, and there's all things of, you know, we see something that he had later that's in the fashion show that kind of references something and similar earlier under different circumstances. So you're seeing how she has come in and influenced his life and influenced his work. And it's very subtle, but it's there. And so we just try to do those kind of things that it's an underlying thing. It doesn't knock you over the head, but it just enriches the experience a little.
So take us behind the scenes, if you will, I mean, into your process of having to not only design these dresses, but having to create multiples of them and having to work on set with these things and kind of go with changes as they come. What is that process like?
Well, luckily we were all set up at the building that formerly St. Martin's in Holborn, central London, and very close to our main set, which was in Fitzroy Square. And so we set up a whole operation of cutters and seamstresses in a workshop. And, you know, we didn't, you mentioned like the multiples things, we really did one-offs. There was only one gown that needed to have multiples. So they are it. I think Barbara Rose's wedding, the black and green shot thing that they take off of her, we had multiplied that. That was the only thing that was multiples. The rest were one-offs, like real couture garments. So we actually did the process like they would have done in a couture house, where there was a design and then a toile was made, which is just a white plain fabric, sort of the same weight as what the finished fabric's going to be, so that you can work out the fitting and where the seams are and how things are constructed. And then we would work on that on the actress and then cut it in the real fabric. So we tried not to skip any steps and tried to make as authentic of a couture garment as was humanly possible, and within the you know, time parameters and manpower and whatever. And we were building clothes throughout the entire shoot because we knew that there were things that wouldn't be needed to the end, and so we did it in the order of need. And so with constant fitting, like grabbing Vicky at lunch or whatever to try on some gowns, and we tried to be quick, and because it's just, I hate to break her mood during the day because she's going to go back to some scenes, but she was a real trooper about it.
Given how integral the costumes are to this movie, and I mean how it all is reflective of the main character's art and his moods and things like that, was there a particular dress that was difficult for you to design just from, like, I guess, like a storytelling point of view, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. You know, I think there's a couple, I think, you know, just figuring out what the Henrietta Harding, the very first client gown, what that was, because some of the details, the ideas were some from woodblock, like the idea of a cape maybe, and the slashing in the front, the pieces here. And so just working it out, what that could be and how the slashing works and how it's spaced, that you know, you can do a stick drawing of it, but what it actually is physically, that was a real challenge. And then, of course, the lavender dress that had the antique lace on it that they use in the photo shoot. Just figuring out how to use this piece of lace. We were able to find 3 meters of this 17th century Flemish lace. Nobody wanted to cut it. We wanted to see how to use it. And I think it came out really beautifully done. But, you know, you have this piece of lace, you know what you're going to, you need to make it into something, and trying to figure out what's the most interesting and flattering way to use it was a really, really good challenge, I think.
You've been a constant collaborator of Paul Thomas Anderson's, going all the way back to the beginning of his career 21 years ago. I believe you've worked on all of his movies by my count. What is that collaboration like, and how has it evolved over time?
What is it like? It's you know, getting together with an old friend to talk about our next hurdle to get over, our next challenge, our next, you know, how are we gonna do, you know, oil derricks? How are we gonna do hippies in 1970? How are we gonna do London couture in 1955? You know, and together we kind of, he does his research and he writes the scripts, talks about his characters, and then we collaborate about how to get in there and how to make it believable and real and interesting. And he's so great as far as wanting everything to be real, feel real, and not feel movie-like or put on. And I really get off on that as far as us not doing anything that seems fake. So I love his sensibilities, and I want to just serve that so much. So I look forward to it as another challenge, you know, to try to figure it out for him and with him. And so after 22 years, yeah, 1995 was our first film together, Hard Eight. It was called Sydney when we made it. You know, that it's kind of a shorthand. We've been through a lot. We've been all over the world, and you know, it's like any other relationship. You know, it has its great moments, and it has its tough moments too. And sometimes in the thick of it, you know, you just rely on each other and trust each other after all these years.
And he is somebody who has kept collaborators like yourself, and I mean, behind the camera throughout all of his movies. So I mean, you guys, by this point, you must really, you and all of the crew must really work as a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, we always, and there's always like some new people who end up being taken into the fold and who are lovely. And but it's nice because the sets are really intimate, and you know, there's a kind of respect and on set for what's going on in front of the camera, and so it's just a really lovely environment to work in and try to create in. Yeah.
You're an Oscar winner for your work on The Artist, and you were nominated again for Inherent Vice. What has that kind of recognition meant for you in your career?
I guess people know my name better, or you know, I'm a little more well known. You know, and it has a cachet, I guess, with some people. What it did is it made me fortunate enough to maybe be able to see more interesting project scripts or be asked to do some more interesting work. So that's nice. That's a really nice benefit of it, really, to be offered a little broader base of projects, really.
Well, Mark Bridges, this is another great movie and a stellar filmography. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great talking to you. Okay,
Thank you.
take care.